Hello, welcome to a special presentation of And the Tournament Winner Was. I'm your host, John Gaspar. This video is brought to you today by TwinSpires. TwinSpires is home to the most robust horse racing cash contest platform that's out there. Darren and Jeremy have done an outstanding job creating and promoting contest play at TwinSpires. This week on TwinSpires, you can find contests for as little as $40, focusing on Horseshoe Indy, Mountaineer, and Keeneland. And coming this weekend, TwinSpires will host the $1,000 Churchill Downs KDBC feeder, a special $1,000 Thurby KDBC feeder, and a $25,000 value-added Kentucky Oaks betting challenge. Go to the TwinSpires app, navigate to tournaments, go check it out, and we'll be seeing you on a leaderboard soon. So we're off topic a little bit this week. So we're going to preview the Kentucky Derby betting challenge. Our goal this week is to discuss the preparations and the strategies used to give yourself a chance to win the contest. And as you can see on the screen, my guests this week are Matt McJunkin and Ryan Petrunyak. Matt and Ryan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks
for having me, John.
You're welcome. So Matt is a Washington, D.C. based handicapper who really excels at cash game tournaments. He won I want to say it's the inaugural, but I don't know if that's what they called it, Oaklawn betting challenge this year and this past
Yeah,
February.
and I'm just realizing that that's left over from an old podcast, so
That's
I'm not
okay.
still gloating from February, but
I got a good kick out of it. I really
can't
like
remove it now.
And Ryan is a Lexington, Kentucky-based handicapper who's a friend of In the Money and it works on our Inner Circle podcasts. Ryan also is an excellent cash game tournament player and currently leads the TwinSpires Tour. You won sessions 2 and 3 and finished third in the first session. Is that accurate?
I think so. That sounds right.
Now, are you holding on for dear life or you got it pretty secure?
I think everyone is kind of leveled out a little bit down the stretch, so we'll see what happens this week. But I think it might be all right at this point. We'll see though.
Yeah, I think the rule changes cemented your place.
Yeah, we'll see how that ends up landing. But there's a week to go, so I wouldn't want to jinx anything.
Fair enough. I won't mush you. I tried to mush Matt McJunkin when he did win Oaklawn. I sent him a note before the contest was over, not realizing there was a race 11.
Yeah,
hopefully that's bringing good luck to both of us.
Exactly. Yeah. So Matt and Ryan represent the new wave of handicapper that has embraced math and statistics to formulate winning strategies. Throw in some game theory at the end of contests, and you have a real deadly combination. So Ryan, did you play in the KDBC last year?
I did. Last year was probably one of my first bigger tournaments I actually ever played in. And I got myself in a pretty good position in that one with a bet on journalism that would have put me – I wouldn't have won it because of some of the big plays that some people hit late, but I would have been up the leaderboard a little bit, but ended up going home with 0.
That's what you're supposed to do, win or go home. And Matt, is this your first KDBC or did you play last year as well?
No, I played last year as well, and kind of same story, one of the first big contests I played in. Have some regrets from the way I played it, but I think I ended up 12th or something.
Okay. And missed the last race, I assume, or did you hit the last race?
No, I hit it. I didn't push as far as I needed to. So That's the regret.
Live and learn, I guess.
Yeah.
So how many entries do you have to the KDBC this year, Matt?
3. So if anybody wants one, reach out.
Okay. And you, Ryan?
I'm playing 2. I got a couple more than that, but I think I've got them. I've got handshakes to get them sold, so I think I'm in good shape there.
That's cool. And how did you earn your entries this year? Was it all through TwinSpires?
Yes, all of them were through TwinSpires. It was a variety of different feeders. I think the first one I won was back in the summer at Saratoga, and then just they had so many opportunities to get in cheap on Thursdays into a Saturday qualifier that, guy in my 20s, I'd rather buy my way into the $100 contest and earn my way and earn the right to bet more, as my friend says. So,
Same story for you, Matt?
Yeah, I think I locked up the second one in October of last year. So yeah, there's so many opportunities to qualify. So,
and at price points all over the map too. Like Ryan said, you could buy it for 100, win an entry, into a larger contest and then get one of 8 or 9 seats that were available.
Right.
All right. So let's talk a little about your prep for the KDBC. Do you, Matt, do any prep before the draw? Meaning, are you watching workouts or reading the Derby news or seeing what's out there in general terms or in more specific terms?
I'm watching the workouts and doing some pedigree dives on horses I might not be super familiar with, but we're so inundated with news about these horses over the last few months that there's very little we don't know. No, but I guess the majority of my work is done after the draw.
And Ryan, how about you? What are you doing before they even draw horses?
I'm doing my absolute best not to formulate final opinions on any race because there's so much, like Matt said, there's so much news out there. And if you look at enough stuff, you could find 20 reasons to love and hate every single horse in the Derby, not to mention some of the undercard races. So just trying to tune out the noise and try to do what I do for every other tournament.
So how do you filter out that noise? I mean, it's all over our Twitter feed. It's all over your news feed as you follow racing. How do you turn off that noise or avoid that noise, Ryan?
Maybe turn off's not the right word. I'm trying to absorb it to get a good read on what the odds are going to be, but just try to stick to what I do. And if I get too caught up in the hype train, like this week, all anyone can talk about is how Chief Wallaby had the greatest work of all time, and he's the next coming of sovereignty. So that's the news cycle these 2 to 3 days, which there will be another news cycle in 2 to 3 days. So anytime I get too caught up in that, just remind myself that, there will be another news cycle, and just to embrace them and enjoy it, but don't let it, don't try to get too in love with anything too early.
Right. How do you feel about looking at horse flesh, Matt, in those workouts? Are you able to ignore the noise and just say he worked fine or he worked like he normally does, or do you take a lot more stock?
I'm able to look at it and know that I'm not entirely sure what I'm looking at. And so that allows me to just say, okay, I think this was good, but I'm going to go look for somebody, a deeper analysis on this. And it's more, if something looks terrible, that'll jump out. But I mean, they're all tuned up for this thing. They're all going to look good. So what are you really going to get from watching these last few workouts?
Yeah,
I agree. That's a good point, Matt. I mean, no matter what happens, the guarantee is everybody becomes a work expert the week before Derby. So there are a lot of guys out there that I trust that watch works year round and do this on a day-to-day basis and are really good at it. So you want to listen to those guys, but just be careful because everyone you listen to becomes a work expert for this week and then the week before Breeders' Cup and then doesn't watch a work the other 50 weeks of the year. So just be very careful where you're getting your information from.
I will say the Bruno with the Works guy has been putting out workouts for dummies where it's not analyzing the works for performance. It's just what was the purpose of it. And honestly, that's been helpful for me because I feel like the title of his posts really, really caught my eye.
You just stole my line. I was going to use the same thing. The I saw dummies. It's like, oh, he's talking to me directly.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's get to after the draw. You may be looking at a handful of horses at certain price ranges, but prior to the past performances coming out. So now we have the earlier races. We have the Derby being drawn. Are you starting to try to formulate plans based on field size, potential morning line odds, et cetera, to try to get to the Derby? Or are you going to wait for the past performances? How are you handling that, Brian?
I've got to see the past performances for all the races. I need to be able to look at it all as an entire card because every tournament you play is a puzzle. And this puzzle includes every race on Derby Day. So if your strongest opinion is in the first race, which is a non-winners at 1 or a maiden special weight, but you absolutely love something, that could be my biggest play of the day. I'm not saying it will be, but you just have to kind of wait until all the information's out before you start formulating those opinions. My opinion.
What about you, Matt?
I'm in the same boat. I there's no point in me moving into my work without having the full PPs.
Okay, so it's funny because I'm a little bit different. I like seeing the draw. I like looking at the fields, and without even seeing the PPs, because we've seen a lot of these horses in the preps leading up to this, whether they're not necessarily the Derby preps, but just the horses that are stakes caliber horses, both on the turf and the dirt, you have a general feel of what they look like. And if they're closers, you probably want them in a good stalking position. You kind of get who might be the speed in the field. Maybe you can decide if one horse is going to be lone speed early, and you can start formulating a plan then. And then when I get the past performances, I try to justify is not the right word. I try to enhance that opinion or back it up with what the past performances tell me too. Gives me like two different ways of looking at it when I start to handicap.
Yeah, and I totally see that approach. I just think it goes back to all the noise around the Derby this time of year, where you have very little bandwidth for some of those horses that maybe their last run was in the Pegasus turf. Like, I mean, I'm thinking of Spirit of St. Louis from last year. Like, you kind of forget that horse exists, and then he romps. So there are some horses that aren't front of mind that, you're kind of reminded of when you look at the PPs.
I think that's fair.
The one I'm thinking of from last year was Copian. So she worked. It was one of the weirdest things I've seen. She worked for Mandela in Santa Anita the Monday before Derby. And I remember watching the show that Pete and all them do that's live. That's like the final pick show with Medallion. And I remember they were speculating. They were like, we know there's going to be a scratch because the Medallion horse is in 15 and they said she's getting in. But we don't know who it's going to be. But that Copian work looks kind of funny. And then she romps and runs an absolutely massive race. And, so you just got to be really careful not to get too in love with any idea before you really have all that information.
How good are you at determining what's good information and what's poor information? Or do you take it all in and then you try to disseminate and let it match up with the past performances?
Well, ask me on Sunday of the Derby. But I'd say I'm probably better than average because I have a couple of people that are really close to me that I really trust. And if what they say backs up my numbers and backs up some of the things I think might be true, then I can give it a little more faith. And I'm not talking about necessarily just the Derby. That's any race. But it's always a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, I ask because I'm lousy at it. I get confused. The more information I get, the worse I get. I just spins around in my head. Do you have an opinion one way or the other, Matt? Do you like more information, less information?
I lean more towards your side because I start to develop some recency bias based on the latest information I heard. And in reality, the information I'm getting is all from people touting their own picks. So it has to be taken with a grain of salt.
I would agree. All right. So we get the past performance. They come out on probably Wednesday by the time it's all said and done, and you get to look at them. So how do you handicap, Matt? Are you a linear handicapper, meaning you're going to start in race one and handicap each race going out to the Derby? Or will you start in the Derby, have an opinion in the Derby, and then work your way back handicapping?
I was just thinking about this because typically I'll start in the last in a regular contest, but with the idea of, okay, I probably will have my top two Derby choices picked by the time I'm getting these PPs. I'll most likely do it in a linear fashion with the goal of how do I get to my money goal for the Derby to make that last bet. So I'll probably move in a linear fashion for this.
How about you, Ryan?
I'll do it how I always do it. I always start with the last race, and I'll deep dive that and figure out maybe not necessarily exactly what I'm going to bet, but a general idea of A, do I want it to be an all-in shove? Is an opinion that's strong enough that I want all the dollars running through it? Or B, is it not? And then after I do that, I can say, okay, what are a couple different ways I can play it? And then what do I need to, what's my dollar goal before the Derby or two races before the Derby in order to get me there? So it has to start with the Derby for me, and then I'll go race 1 through 10 or 12 or however many before it after I do that.
Depending on circumstance and bankroll, will you be willing to bet multiple horses in the Derby to try to get to a money goal or a bankroll goal?
Absolutely. And that might be in doubles, that might be in win bets, that might be in exactas. It just depends. But I'd say in this contest more than any other, it's actually easier to do that because the horses that are 8-1 in the Derby are very logical. They're not
fourth choice.
Yeah. Sovereignty over journalism paid what, like 24-1 last year?
Exactly. And that was debatably the most likely exacta. The other thing that is going to be huge for me when I come up with my final decision on the last race, if I were to, let's just for example say the three main favorites are going to be Renegade, Commandment, and Further Ado, right? If my two strongest picks are two of those three, and I want to be live to two of those three or some kind of exacta there, I really have to hit the Derby hard, because I'm not going to be the only one with that opinion. There's going to be other people in this contest that are going to hit that. I think that's why last year so many people hit that last race, because realistically, Sovereignty and Journalism, I don't think Sovereignty was actually the second choice in the win pool, but for most people that are serious handicappers, I think he was likely the second most played horse. And, Sandman took money for other reasons. If my biggest opinion in this race is, I'm just pulling who's 30-1, Golden Tempo and Wonder Dean. Maybe I don't need an all-in shove there. Maybe I can just get, maybe I just need a stronger opinion earlier and I can just get cute with a blocking bet. So it really depends on what you like. And you also kind of have to handicap the field and what's everyone else going to think too.
Now, are you going into the contest with a bankroll multiple in mind? I know in the smaller ones, Matt, we may use a 10x bankroll, but in the Derby with the 20-horse Derby field and likely a 4-1 favorite, do you have to shoot a little bit higher now for that bankroll multiple?
Yeah, I mean, just looking at last year's results, you're probably looking at 15 to 20. It might be a little lower this year just because we're not going to have a short price favorite that gets into the exacta like we did with Journalism, but I'd say 15 to 20.
What are you shooting for, Ryan?
Again, that's going to depend on who I like in the last. I think if one of the three main favorites wins, 20x is probably going to be close to necessary. If it's somebody a little more creative and the exactas and tries get crazy, then you're probably closer to 12's too low, 15x probably. But it completely depends on that last race, because I mean, guys like Frank Mastari that are fantastic at nailing one exacta, if they can find a $20 exacta, that's a 20x bankroll you're going to need.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's a lot of guys like that out there. I'm just using him as an example because he's the guy that nailed it last year. But, if you have a year where Rich Strike runs up the rail, how many contest players are going to have that? I'm not sure, but I do think that will create either a lower total or an insane total, one of the two.
Yeah, and that insane total, if it is an insane total, will likely be one player. Yeah. One player hit it really hard as opposed to 3 or 4 players that have that same really large long shot or really large exacta.
Exactly. And that's the other reason I say if your strong opinion's 230-1 shots, you could play for a 12 to 15x total to have the lead or close to the lead going in the last. And then if you happen to nail those shots, good job. If you don't and you finish second, that's third in this contest. It's not the end of the world if you finish second or third here. That'd be a pretty good Derby day for most.
Yeah, as long as you give yourself a chance to win in the process.
Absolutely.
So in the Kentucky Derby Betting Challenge, they have 7 minimum plays that you need to make at $250 each, which is more than a lot of the standard TwinSpires contests where they just have you make 5 minimum plays. And now we're going to get big fields in the Derby, show bets, although still probably likely are not going to be as certain as they can be in shorter fields. How do you look at these minimum bets? Are you going to try to preserve bankroll? Are you going to try to take shots? How are you looking at that? And I know it also depends on where your first really good opinion is. How do you think about that, Matt?
To be honest, in these big competitions, I'm trying to get a number early so that it doesn't matter. If I start worrying about my minimums, it means I'm not in a position that I planned on being. And odds are I'm playing from the back foot.
And Ryan, are you in the same boat? I know you have a propensity to kind of push a little bit early and post a score and then evaluate where you are.
I really, really hope I have an opinion before there's, 7 minimums before the whatever 7 races left. I really hope I can make a move before that. I will say, if not, I'm much less likely. I'm not saying I won't. If the scenario sets up, then I would do it. But I'm much less likely to play a show bet in a 14-horse field that's wide open because your odds of winning it are still not great. So at that point, you might as well use that capital for an opportunity to move the ball forward, even if it's just taking a stab with an exacta or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I mean, or Dutching win bets with some prices you like in there. Like you're got a better shot there.
Yeah.
You could Dutch 3 horses in some of these fields if you like 10-1 and above, and just try to increase your bankroll by some factor of whatever 3 or 4 the minimum bet, because it's just as likely, in my opinion, to hit that as it is to hit the show bet.
I mean, which is what we might see some of the guys, if anybody likes those really long prices in the Derby, that might be how they play it. Just slowly build up bankroll and to take that shot in the last.
Yeah.
If you think about it, the other way to think about it too, if you can hit 3 out of 6, if you really have a 20-1 opinion in the Derby, whether that's an exacta or a win bet, and you really want to bet the Derby, which I don't think is necessarily the best strategy, but if that was what you wanted to do, you really only have to hit 3 out of 6 even money bets, whether that's a show bet on a 3-1 shot or Dutching win bets on 5-1 shots, whatever that looks like. Get yourself to the bankroll and bet your winning bet. I don't think that's a bad strategy either, if that's how you want to play it. I don't think that's necessarily my style, and I don't think it's Matt's style either. I think we're both more likely to push earlier and be sitting with 0 with a bourbon before the Derby, but we'll see.
Yeah, I do want you to consider this though, as math people, in playing a little bit of game theory. If you do hit a big bet early and you get your bankroll to a position where you're just trying to preserve bankroll, and you're thinking about a show bet, if the horse you're thinking about to show can pay $240 or more, you don't have to bet your entire $250 to show, because you're just trying to preserve your bankroll, right? So if you bet $200 on the horse that's going to pay $2.40 to show, you're going to collect $247. If you bet $210, you collect $252. So that other $40, you can almost play like a free roll on a cold exacta, a cold trifecta.
Yeah.
So if your horse still runs third, you collect $250. You got a minimum, and you didn't lose any ground. You did exactly what you intended. And for that other $40, you gave yourself a real shot to actually hit a bet and move your bankroll up significantly. It's something I think you consider. I heard this strategy from Ed Peters quite a few years ago playing in a contest, and I don't do it that often, but on these big mandatory minimum bets that you have to make, sometimes I think it's something to consider.
Yeah.
No, and you don't get the opportunity that often to do that, to utilize that strategy either. Because, if I'm putting a show bet on a Thursday TwinSpires contest, it's most likely paying $210.
Okay. Yeah. And the other thing too, I kind of think if I were to hit, and I'm not, hopefully Matt and I both, we'll probably both be out before the thing even starts, but hopefully if one or both of us hits and we're sitting at 12 to 15,000, somewhere in that range, let's just use a round number to make it easy. I don't think it's the worst idea if there's another opinion late and you just have to get through the minimums, play an aggressive $250 bet, play a $250 bet that you can hit on Derby Day for 5 figures and really move. So like you said, John, if that $40 bet would move the ball forward, let's really jump forward if you're right. I don't think that's a bad idea. I prefer that strategy on a day like Derby Day than a show bet strategy that I would employ on a Thursday.
Yeah, I think there's some nuance there. If you're up at 15 and your minimum bets can only drop you down to, say, 13.5 because you got 6 minimums that you need to play, you're better off betting those, like you say, an aggressive $250 cold exacta, cold trifecta in a race, and really move the needle. Because the difference between 13.5 and 15,000 going into the lost race, I think is going to be negligible. If you only get to 4,000 or 5,000, and now you do need to make sure you try to preserve some bankroll, and you can't afford to lose 20% of your bankroll, then I think it's a strategy to consider to try to get the free roll and just kind of bet the show bet.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any opinion on that, Matt, or you think I'm full of shit?
No, I mean, I completely agree. But, I just think back to what the Exacta paid in the Derby last year, and $1,500 still matters a ton. Like if you can turn that, into 36,000, it's important. So yeah, I mean, I think there's many ways to play it, but I do like the strategy of taking shots with the 250 if you're in a good position.
So how many? Go ahead, Ryan.
I was just saying that's where reasonable people can disagree, because I think that you're completely right. That $1,500 can make the difference, but you also got to think, how much risk are you taking playing show bets versus the risk you're taking a shot? And if that shot hits, and I don't think there's a wrong answer there. It's just, how do you prefer to play? And if you're the kind of player that feels like you have a better chance to utilize that 1,500 in the last, then you should do that. And if you think you're the kind of player that can utilize those other $250 shots, then you should do that. And it just kind of, you have to work these, you have to think about this math in the context of your own skill set and your own typical way of playing.
How dare you invoke reasonable people when you're talking about horsepower?
We're obnoxious, aren't we?
Exactly. We all have egos that are about this big, and so
just think of the tweets you're going to get for that.
No comment.
So how many steps do you think it's going to take you to get to your your optimal bankroll going into the Derby? Like, are you trying to do it in 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps? Or just say, in general terms, as few as it takes to get to the number you need before you get to the Derby? Do you have an opinion on that, Matt?
I mean, I'm hoping it's 2 when I take a look at the card, but I think it's 2 or 3. It just depends on what my strongest opinion is, and if it's 3 favorites over others and exactas or doubles, it's going to take 3, but if it's some long prices that hit, I could be 2, but I'm guessing 2 or 3.
What about you, Matt? Ryan, are you in the same boat?
In a perfect world, it'd be one big bet before the Derby. It will likely be 2, but it just depends on, again, can I find a double that I can, go 2 by single or 3 by 2 with some prices in there, whatever that looks like, to get me to a move that I can just make a final move in the Derby. On the flip side, if I handicap the Derby and I just can't come up with something I really want to be all in on, it might be a 2 move to try to get to basically a winning score before the Derby and come catch me, and then hope a rich strike scenario happens. Right. But the idea is, for me, just put your capital at risk as few times with as little risk as possible to get to that target goal.
Okay. So last year's winner was Frank Mastari, and he had a bankroll of 67,000. David Rink was second at 59,000. Doug Bradar, ITM's JK, and Patrick Stitch were third through fifth between $40,000 and $50,000. So that's a general bankroll area that we're thinking about that you need to get to. So how much bankroll would you like heading into the Derby, Ryan? Do you have like a group of horses you look at, and if you like a 5-to-1 shot, you want to have 10 grand going into the Derby, or are you agnostic? Whatever you have going in, you're going to find the horse and the price that you want to bet?
No, I'm probably the opposite of that, where I'm going to know on Saturday morning what I like in the Derby and then work backwards from there. So, like, if I just like a 4-to-1 shot, then I'm probably looking in that 12,000 range is probably about where I want to be, or a little better than that. If I think I need 5 horses to lock this thing up, then maybe it's trying to play doubles to get live into 5 horses, and maybe I need to get to 30 before that and able to afford that. So for me, I want to look at the Derby before the day starts and have that target number, and then work to I kind of have 2 targets. I've got the final target and the target before the Derby, and the target before the Derby is going to depend on what I like in the Derby. I don't know. I might have been too long-winded there, but that's kind of
what you said. You said it perfectly fine. And Matt, you had said that you're likely to have the 1, 2, or 3 horses that you're looking at in the Derby before you even start handicapping. I assume you're working the same way. You're depending on the horses that you do like in the Derby, you're going to extrapolate those odds and figure out the numbers you need to get to them.
Yeah, and it's almost running a decision tree through every race based off of the value I think I'm going to get out of those early races to get to. My guess is I'm going to want to be around 15, 20 come Derby time.
Is simple better going into the Derby, meaning one large win bet is much easier than trying to formulate doubles, exactas, tries? Do you feel that way, Matt?
You know, if you have the conviction, I think it is, but you know, in our field as wide open as the one we're going to have, I'm not sure that opportunity is going to present itself to you. I think you got to get a little bit creative. I mean, you saw the plays that won last year. I think did Frank hit the exacta or the try? Like, and looking back, that's, you know, it's not the most, it wasn't the most creative pick when we're looking at a year from now, but it was still creative in the time. And I think you do have to get like that in the Derby. I think people are trying to hit stuff. And if somebody ends up with a long shot in third or second and that hits, they're going to get through it. I mean, that was just a long-winded way of saying I think you're going to have to sit there and do some math.
Are you of the same opinion, Ryan?
I would rather do as little math as possible at that point in the day and keep it as simple as possible. And my reasoning is, I mean, how many times have you guys hit the try in the Derby? It just not in the contest, just in your lives.
I mean, I've also never hit a try in a contest, so
okay,
there we go.
I'm older than both of you, so I have done it a couple of times, but it's taken me a lot of tries.
It's hard. I mean, it's really hard to do. So I would way rather just find a more likely scenario than trying to connect 3 horses in a 20-horse field. I will likely not be playing tries. I will say that. I'm not opposed to an exact.
Yeah, neither will I. I just want to be very clear on that.
And there will guys that will be that do that very well. You know, Tommy Massis will be firing tries, I'm sure. You know, Frank's not afraid to do it. There's guys that do it really well, that do it better than Matt and I do it. And if that's your style, then go for it. But that's really just not my style. I think it's a lot easier to find a more likely scenario earlier in the card than trying to connect a race like that.
So
it might be that I can't put together verticals or anything in the Derby, and it's like, okay, then I got to get a number where I can make 3 sizable win bets to get to the number I want to get to. I mean, that's not my ideal scenario, but that could be how it plays out.
Yeah. So do you try to avoid getting yourself into those tough situations, meaning you want 12 to 15,000, you have 6,000 going into race 10. You're going to bet some sort of combination to get yourself 2 to 1 to get to your 12,000 number, or you're going to be broke. You're not going to leave yourself in that no man's land of, say, between 3,000 and 6,000 for the Derby. Is that a fair statement, or will you still try to maneuver depending on what your opinion is?
Again, I'd have to have a really strong opinion in the Derby to not be all in some point before the Derby. But if I handicap the race, and I think a 20 to 1 is going to be a ton of value and might be one of the more likely winners in the field, then yeah, I might just try to float on one entry and just get myself there. But I would rather take a little more risk early in a race where I feel like I have a better idea than 23-year-olds where 5 of them are going to lose all chance at the break. You know, I'd rather take more risk in other races.
Yeah, and I'm of the same mindset, because honestly, if you go into the Derby without a long shot as your top opinion and you're not sure you're at your bankroll yet, odds are you're going to end up, if you hit, looking up at somebody who was able to play a little bit more on the same opinion you had. And you'll feel great that you were right, but you're not putting yourself in a winning position at the time.
So I do have a theoretical question that you two are both going to avoid being in that position. But if you needed a 20 to 1 shot going into the Derby, are you more likely to get off a horse that you like and bet a horse that's going to be 20-1 in the Derby, and there's going to be 5 to 8 of them? Or would you take the horse you like and try to formulate exactas with that horse on top over 2-3 other horses to try to get 20-1 net on your money? Do you have a style that you would prefer, Ryan, or do you?
I don't prefer one style, but for the Derby in particular, it would be very obvious to me which one I would do. And here's why. If, let's just say, for example, last year I liked Sandman. I didn't. Let's just say I liked Sandman. He was like 5-1 in the win pool, but he was way higher than that in implied odds in the exacta, because the Derby win pool is always so wonky because of some, horses like that get bet sometimes. So if I would have liked Sandman last year, I would have pivoted to that exacta pool immediately. Where on the flip side, journalism or sovereignty, I think I would have tried to move to one of the other horses I like in the win pool. So I would have ended up on like a Baeza in that situation where I would have lost. But it just depends on who you like and where you can extract value from the Derby pool, because there's probably more discrepancy between the horizontals and the win pool in the Kentucky Derby than just about any other race that we're going to play all year.
Yeah, so that's in theory my question. Does it matter who you like at that point? If you need 20-1, does it matter who you like? Or are you just looking for the horses that are going to give you 20-1, right? Does it matter whether it was Baeza last year or an exactor of sovereignty over journalism? Does it matter who you liked, or is it just a random 20-1 payoff that you need to look for?
Well, I guess I'm saying if it was Sandman, then I'd play exactas. But if I liked journalism, then I would have pivoted to Baeza, because I couldn't have gotten that value out of the exacta pool.
Okay.
So,
yeah. I mean, you're right. It's completely situational, and you're almost going down through your rankings of Derby horse and be like, okay, can I get that value from some combination with this horse? Okay, no, got to move down to the next one. And that's how I view it.
Yeah. And I think that's the right way to do it. You go till you find the odds that you need, regardless of who the horse's name is or your opinion of his chances of winning. You're still assuming that the public gets it mostly right and that it's an efficient pool. So a 20-1 exacta has the same chance as the 20-1 horse of coming in. So it's just a matter, I think, of personal preference of what you're most comfortable doing.
Yeah. And you could ask 20 of the top players and they would all give you some kind of value answer, and they're all going to come up with a different way to play it probably. So yeah, that's part of the fun of this puzzle.
Correct. And the reason why I ask is, in my head, I think most handicappers take the horse they like over 2 or 3 other horses in an exacta to try to get 20-1 versus taking a 20-1 shot in the odds. And they think it's more likely that the 20-1 exactor is going to hit versus the 20-1 horse. And I was just curious what people that look at this game with a math-based approach and a strategy and a game theory approach, if you look at it the same way or you look at it differently.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think it just depends on it. Every race is different for me. So sometimes I'm going to pivot, and sometimes if I have a huge opinion, then I maybe won't pivot as much.
So you guys play a similar style. Do you have questions you'd like to ask each other about how you look at the races?
I think we actually spent pretty much the entire weekend together at Keeneland. So we and funny enough, it ended up with, I think it was the Saturday $100 contest at TwinSpires, ended up duking it out the entire day. So we got a first.
Not the entire day. I took a pretty commanding lead, and then he just wanted to jump in because, making fun. So then he jumped me, I jump him, and then he beat me in the last race naturally. But he entered at the last second. It wasn't the entire day.
I entered when I got to the track. How about that?
Fair enough.
Excellent.
But no, I mean, I think what's great about playing these TwinSpires tournaments is you can go back and look at everybody's plays and see kind of their thought process without even talking with them. Well, I mean, obviously getting to talk face to face is nice, but it's a wealth of information when it comes to being able to look at how the top players approach tournament betting.
I got a question for Matt. You tend to leverage favorites in doubles or exactas a lot of the time.
Yeah.
What are something you look for in favorites that you like to avoid? To say, maybe I won't play this spot, I'm going to find a different favorite to lean on. If you want to share that.
If they're coming off of their biggest effort, look for a bounce. I mean, especially if we're talking about like claimers and stuff, obviously not in the top races, but I'm a pace player a lot of the time. So if they're up against an unfavorable pace scenario and they're just a favorite because of their raw numbers, I'll definitely avoid them. But it's so situational. But you're right. I do tend to use favorites to turn them into from 6-5 to 5-1 more often than not.
You do similar, Ryan. What is your criteria to bet two horses to win on two different tickets to try to combine your ticket in one horse? What are you looking for in that type? Are you looking to bet against a bad favor, or are you looking for the most likely winners in a race?
I'm looking to bet against horses, but not necessarily bad favorites. So especially if you can find a spot with, a couple 3-1 shots, and there's one 3-1 shot you feel like you can bet against pretty strongly, that's where you can use the tournaments to leverage that opinion a little bit. But like Matt, I'm a pace guy and relying on figures mostly.
Okay. All right. So I'll let you guys get out of here, but I want some final thoughts. I want your best piece of advice going into the tournament, Matt.
I was thinking about this today, and when you're looking at the undercard, take notice of the fact that it is Derby Day. There are going to be some horses entered in there who maybe don't belong, and they're there because their connections want to be there. And I think it's going to present opportunities to completely eliminate horses from contention just because you can find a reason why they're there that's not because of how good they are. So there might be opportunities earlier on in the card just with being able to maybe eliminate half the field.
Great. And Ryan, how about you?
I would say whenever you're playing a big tournament, make sure you decide ahead of time if you're in a certain spot, what you're willing and able to bet. So if you're not the kind of person that's willing to make a 5-figure shove in the last race or don't want to do that, make that decision at 10 a.m. Don't try to make that decision, not necessarily what the bet is, but what are you willing to do to win, and where would you tuck some money? How much would you tuck? Kind of set those parameters in your head. So that way, when they're singing My Old Kentucky Home, you're not stressing about how much you're going to do. You're just figuring out what makes the most sense. And that's just a mental health, way to gambling advice, more so than handicapping advice.
I think that's excellent advice.
Because it's also the Derby. You want to enjoy watching the Derby and not be freaking out up until the last second.
Yeah. And there's not a wrong answer to that. I know there's some folks out there that say if you're not willing to bet at all, you shouldn't be in the tournament. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think if you're not playing for the prize pool, maybe you're a little out of your depth, but there's nothing wrong if you have a huge day and you have an opinion in the Derby that can win it for you, but you want to tuck a portion of the money. Chris Couples did that in the Pegasus tournament. He had already won his seat in, so he tucked half the money in the last race, and he liked Skippy long stockings. So he bet the other half on Skippy. Nobody else had it, and he won the Pegasus tournament. So you can win without going all in if that's what you're comfortable with doing, but just make that decision of what you're comfortable with at 10 a.m., not at 6 p.m. That would be my biggest advice.
Yeah, and we're probably going to see a lot of that just with the fact that this is the tournament where there are the most opportunities to qualify. So there are far fewer people putting up that $5,000 to enter versus qualified through TwinSpires, and it's just a free shot, and they might just want to walk away with some cash at the end of the day.
Yep.
Yeah, and like you're saying, you don't have to push all in, but you need to give yourself a chance to win. So you need to make a bet in the Derby that if you hit it, it gives you 60,000, 70,000, 50,000, whatever that number is, that gives you a chance to partake in that prize pool. It doesn't mean you have to bet your 15,000 to try to win, but you need to make a bet to try to win the tournament.
Yeah.
And my final thoughts were it echoes a lot of what you're saying. You have to be aggressive in spots that you feel like give you an edge, and then you're timid in the spots where you don't think you have an edge and you don't have an opinion. And one of the overriding factors of any tournament, and you two embody this quite well, is don't be afraid to go broke. If you're betting in a race where you think you have an edge and you have a strong opinion, you can't be afraid to go broke.
Hope we don't, but we'll see.
Yeah. Fingers crossed.
All right. We will leave it there. Thank everybody. I want to thank Ryan and thank Matt for coming on with me tonight to discuss some of your strategies and your preparation for the Kentucky Derby Betting Challenge.
Thanks, John. Good luck next weekend.
John.
Thank you. Take care.